What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Barbie and Oppenheimer, Barbenheimer, once again completely decimate the box office, and combined together, they have both, in just 2 weeks, made well over $1 billion, and Barbie, by her own right, will easily cross $1 billion, probably within the next week or two at most, as the film has now made $775 million worldwide as of the recording of this video, with Oppenheimer making a very impressive $400 million. Very impressive, especially when you remember it's a 3-hour drama by Christopher Nolan, and even though a lot of people have had a lot of positive things to say about it, I think that all of us can at the very least admit that the Barbenheimer meme is absolutely what has been helping this film out to such a degree. Less so for Barbie. Barbie seems to have likely have been a success even without the whole Barbenheimer meme, but it definitely has helped that film out as well as it has with a plethora of other films. Before we go, make sure you smash that like button, wherever it is that you're watching, smash it. Let's go ahead and dive into the numbers. So Nancy, good old Nance, over at Deadline says, Barbie pirouettes to powerhouse $775 million global opening, where Oppenheimer is a phenom at $400 million. Good old Nance is actually getting her update in before Tony over at Deadline, which is oftentimes not the way it tends to work out. Warner Brothers Barbie continued to show its prowess this weekend worldwide, riding a wave of hot pink fun, savvy marketing, and sincere messaging to a powerful $774.5 million global Sunday. Now, let's just be frank, that is putting it quite nicely. It's ignoring some key things the marketing very much leaves out of the movie. But hey, cannot deny the numbers as they stand. Clearly, the female audience, the female demographic is showing up in droves to see this movie. And based on the numbers that we're seeing, likely to see this film multiple times. This is just the sophomore session with the movie tops at the international box office and worldwide for the second weekend in a row. The offshore take for this session was $122.2 million in 69 markets, just 32% below its opening weekend. So it only dropped 32%, and we know that domestically it also dropped in the 40s, so this just goes to show you that this movie is doing incredibly well. The international cum is $423.1 million. Domestic was $93 million this weekend for a running North American of $351. Now that's, I think, a big factor as to why this film is doing as well as it is. It's not only a domestic phenomenon. This is a movie that's making even more money internationally, and it'll be interesting to see where those numbers fall by the end of the run, but the fact that you're going to have a closer to a 50-50 split, meaning you're doing very well domestically and internationally, is why I can now say and confirm this movie is going to be a billion-dollar film. There's just no indications whatsoever at this point in time when it comes to the holds from day to day, whether it was the 40% drop from its Sunday to Monday, which was a strong hold, whether it was a 0% drop from its Tuesday to Wednesday, and again, between its first and second weekend, only dropping a total of about 44-45% or so. We're still waiting on the final numbers to come in, but making well over what even the studio, Warner Brothers, thought the film was going to make in its opening weekend. People sometimes forget that Warner Brothers only thought the film was going to make $75 million in its opening, went on to make over $160 million, and then in the second weekend has made $93. So that is, again, how strong this film is holding in various ways. Going into the actual numbers themselves, as you can see, Barbie is the number one film, still $21,000 per screen. So again, continuing to show those strong numbers, a 43% hold from week 1 to week 2, and actually even added 94 screens. So not only was it adding theaters, but it also ended up having a very strong hold. In a just similar situation, also Oppenheimer only dropped 44%. So both of these films clearly working in tandem in certain ways, with Barbie taking the much larger brunt of it, having a much bigger audience, much bigger female demographic in this capacity, driving out a lot of people out, whereas Oppenheimer, though it is much more male-dominated, is not driving out nearly as many in this way. And again, for a 3-hour drama, that makes a lot of sense. Coming in the number 3 spot is Walt Disney's The Haunted Mansion. That's right, Disney had another movie come out this week, and even though $24.2 million domestic doesn't sound terrible, when you are putting this up against other films, when you're putting this up against Sound of Freedom in its 4th week of release, getting $12.4 million once again, continuing to be incredibly impressive, and you also put into the fact that this is a Disney release, yeah, Haunted Mansion is definitely getting crowded out by Oppenheimer and Barbie as well. And based on the numbers that we're seeing right now, probably will be yet another box office bust for Disney at this point in time. Now, this will not be the biggest box office bust that they've had this year because their budget was much more manageable, and by manageable, I mean only costing $150 million, whereas their other films have cost well north of $200 million, but the fact still remains that opening to around $30 million worldwide in its opening weekend, not a great start overall for this film, even though the word of mouth has not been terrible. Again, I've heard some pretty good things from people that I trust, but also enough to where I hear not a lot of people saying, yeah, I liked it, but I didn't really care to see it ever again. So that's not really going to be able to get your repeat viewings up, which is why I think Haunted Mansion will probably end up seeing a pretty typical drop-off next weekend. Sound of Freedom, though, continuing to hold very strong from Angel Studios, only 37% of a drop, adding another 126 theaters. So, we think Barbie's per theater ratio is impressive, and indeed it is. But when you were talking about a week being out for 4 weeks, where every single person in the mainstream media has been trying to just downplay and destroy the narrative surrounding this movie, trying to claim so-called conspiracy theories, etc. Hey, Sound of Freedom is still standing up to that, and people are going out to see the film in droves. Coming to the number 5 spot is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which overall, for a third week drop, yes, it indeed dropped 1,130 screens, but I think that this is something that's important to mention. It dropped 1,000 screens, and yet it only dropped 45%. So even though Mission Impossible is not in a good state whatsoever, I'm not saying that there's a chance of the film to make massive amounts of money. I mean, it's not going to be able to do that domestically. It might have a better chance of doing better internationally than what some might have thought, because it actually had a decent hold there. But regardless of any of that, the fact that it was able to have 1,000 theaters drop and it only dropped 45%, typically when you see that level of theaters drop, you have a massive drop off, because those are those many more screens, those many more theaters where you don't have the movie showing up, you don't have people going to see it. So actually for 3 weeks out, that's actually not terrible. The biggest issue with this film was that it had a terrible opening week scheme, right? It had a terrible strategy to try to put the film out, trying to get those extra IMAX screens. And again, I understand why they tried to do it, but clearly it impacted the way that people were watching the movie. Add to that the fact that it had to go up against the Barbenheimer effect, and this film just did not have a lot of chance. Even though the film is incredibly good and has had a lot of positive word of mouth as well, it might be able to maybe hold things out a little bit further, make a little bit more money down the line because of these strongholds and because it is getting those positive reactions. But at this point, it's not looking like it'll be enough to be able to make up too much of the money that it still needs to make to break even. Barbie worldwide, $774.5 million. Again, these are insane numbers here. If you go ahead and try to pull up, let me see if I can find the metric that they typically have here. There we go. As you can see, it is right on the top of what the historical average for an opening weekend as this film had would be. So this film well on its way to $1 billion. I'll show you all the chart in a second. Oppenheimer, $400 million worldwide, means this film could end up in the $700 million range or so by the end of its run. Worst case scenario would be in the $500 million range, but based on the fact that Barbenheimer is continuing to hold very strong and they're continuing to hold strong together, makes me think that we're going to see those numbers hold out. Haunted Mansion from 2023. That's right, a remake everyone was asking for, only made $33.2 million, and even though this is not the worst numbers that they could have expected, it is definitely not good based on the budget that it has. Sound of Freedom, $148. This film, again, is going to easily cross $150 million within the next day or so, and this film has even a chance at getting upwards of $200 million by the end of its run if these holds continue to go forward. With Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning at now $447 million worldwide, as you can see, a much larger chunk of that money is coming from the international box office, which is the reason why I say this movie could end up actually making a lot more than what the numbers might right now seem to indicate. However, with the film needing to make at least $625 million worldwide to break even, some people having their own figures of the break even being closer to $900 million, this film is going to be basically maybe getting to the cusp of the low end, but even then, I don't think it's going to get quite there, but we'll have to wait and see. 45% hold with losing 1,000 theaters is a good sign, but jury's still out on that one, and I just don't have a lot of high hopes in general for that to happen, even though the film absolutely deserves to be seen and to be treated in that way. But let's go ahead and dive into the projections right now. So with $774 million worldwide for Barbie, based off of typical historical standards, right, if the film ends up having some pretty big drop-offs, right, let's say that this entire 2-week opening frame accounts for 70% of the entire box office run, that would mean a worst-case scenario would be around $1.1 billion. So this is the reason why I say $1 billion is guaranteed and probably will happen within the next week or so because of just the rate it's making money, right? It's making $20+ million every single day domestically and is also continuing to keep pace almost pretty much the same level internationally, if not even better, which is the reason why we're looking at these numbers and saying, okay, yeah, $1 billion probably less than a week out at this point in time, especially with not a whole lot of competition in the marketplace. Also, if this film ends up doubling what it's made so far, so if it has these kind of holds, right, 30% hold right now internationally, 44%, 43% hold domestically, if those holds continue in that exact same way, you could see this film get upwards of $1.5 billion, which means, yeah, we're going to get somewhere between 1.1 and 1.5 billion for this movie by the end of its run. So does that mean the film has a chance of beating Mario? I think there's a chance. However, it's not a guarantee, right? So again, the numbers right now are looking really, really good for Barbie to be able to at least be in the discussion. It's going to be either the second or the top grossing film of the year. But again, we'll have to wait and see where those numbers end up by the end of this run. Either way, though, we're looking at mass profits for the studio, for Warner Brothers, and this is something that they desperately needed, having massive losses in every single other area of their life, right? 446 million to 700 plus million in net gain profits. Now, obviously, that's going to be before you split that between Warner Brothers and Mattel. Mattel is going to get a cut of that when all is said and done, but still, definitely going to be happy to have those hundreds of millions of dollars in profits, whereas they've had films like The Flash, for instance, which have lost hundreds of millions of dollars as well. With the Haunted Mansion's $33 million start, with a $150 million budget, the break-even is going to be somewhere around $375 million or more, which means that right now it's around $205 million in the red. So even though the film, again, is not in the worst-case scenario that we've seen from a Disney film this year, it's mostly just because they didn't spend nearly as much money on it as they have with other films. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, as I had mentioned previously, is still not looking like a great scenario, right, in the projections from the numbers that we had going into it. Right now, the projections were that the film would get somewhere between, right, if it had massive drop-offs, that it would end somewhere around $529.7 million. Now, here's the thing, though. With this being a week 3, and with this seeing a pretty strong hold domestically and a strong hold internationally as well, that means that the chances of it only getting to 529 probably won't be the end point for it. Now we're starting to look at this number, maybe getting closer to that $600 million range or so, which, again, would put it right around the break-even point that I have for the film. If it gets close to 725 million, sorry, I said 625 earlier, 725 million is the break even I have. Some others might have it closer to 900. So again, I think that it actually has a better chance of making up more money than what had been previously expected, but it's still not a good look nonetheless, right? Even if you're able to just get to your break-even point or just miss out on the break-even, you don't put hundreds of millions of dollars into a movie just to break even or just to make a little bit of profit. And even though we could argue that they will probably get some money for streaming rights of the movie, as Paramount Plus is not available in all countries, and so that means they'll be able to make deals with other countries and other markets to be able to get the film out to those places when it goes on streaming. And we also know that it won't go on streaming for quite a long time, as Tom Cruise and the others behind the project are going to be pushing it to stay in theaters for as long as possible. Things probably won't end up being nearly as bad for that movie as it will be for films like, Disney and Warner Brothers, where their films have to go, don't have to wait too long to go to their streaming services, and then they don't get any money from that because they're just giving it to themselves at the end of the day. But those are the numbers currently as they stand. We also had a new film, Talk to Me, which is getting a lot of buzz right now as a horror flick, and this film made $10 million, and so again, pretty much on the cusp of breaking even itself. But if you want to have any other updates on the current films, you can go ahead and check out my chart over at ombReviews.com, and I'll have a fuller box office breakdown over on my channel in just a little bit. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. Do you think that Barbie is going to get to $1 billion by the end of this week, or do you think it'll be closer to 2 weeks? Let me know when you think that is going to happen in the comment section down below. Again, smash that like button wherever it is that you're watching. Smash it. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.